Very good afternoon to you. If you're just joining us, let's turn our attention to this story now. Dispossessed homeowners are challenging major banks for repossessing their houses and selling them off for a song. Banks in South Africa have for years repossessed properties for a fraction of a market. And the Lungelo Ditokelo Human Rights Foundation has now filed an affidavit to support a 60 billion rand class action lawsuit. This is after it was found that some properties were sold for about 50 to 60% of their property value. Homeowners hope to recover billions of rands in lost home equity as a result. Well, joining us now to speak about this is Erwin Roeder. He is a property economist and he joins us via the virtual system that we use nowadays with COVID-19. Mr. Roeder, thank you very much for your time. Is it true that banks indeed do sell properties? If I could make just one quick example for you, that is made, for example, this is the allegation that's made against FNB, Standard Bank, Nedbank. And in one case, it says here that several properties selling at auction for 1,000 rand when the market value was 200,000 to 440,000. Is this indeed true?
Of course, I cannot comment on the specifics, and neither am I a bank employee, so I'm not very close to what happens. But we know it's a question of fact that this sort of thing can happen. I've heard stories about it myself. I've also heard a story that what is happening in some cities, and I'm not saying it's all cities, but that when the sheriff does an auction, there's a mafia gang that collude and in that, and they keep out outsiders, and in that way they ensure that prices are held down. So whether that is true or not, I'm not aware of a recent study that's been done on this question, but it seems plausible to me from what I've heard.
Yeah, and as someone who watches, or should I say who monitors this property industry closely, we are now in the middle of a second wave of COVID-19. And if you are knowledgeable at all about the current situation, would you say that bank repossessions and evictions are probably at an all-time high right now, given the kind of economic calamity that has come with this pandemic?
I can't say that at the moment. I haven't got hard evidence to that effect, but if it's not happening already, then it will happen in this year or next year, start happening because of the dire state of the economy, of course, because people are going to lose they've already lost their jobs, and many more will lose their jobs. So this is just the beginning of, I'm sure, of a very dire state of affairs that will last for a number of years in South Africa.
Yeah.
The problem for South Africa is that the state is bankrupt, and there will have to be cutting salaries, or at least salaries will stagnate, and there will have to be layoffs, and in the private sector and in the public sector. And you could just imagine for yourself what that will do to people who recently bought when interest rates were, say, 7% or 8% or what. And let's say, for argument's sake, here's a scenario that from next year onwards, interest rates start rising again. You could imagine that it's going to be a bloodbath, I'm afraid.
And talk to us, Mr. Roeder, about what banks on their end are doing to try and assist homeowners who find themselves in a difficult financial situation. Are you aware of what it is that they do to assist?
I'm not close enough to the banks, and there are many banks, and each bank, of course, will have its own policy in this respect. But from what I generally know is that banks really try their best not to kick out people from their homes. This is a general opinion I have of banks in South Africa. from the mortgageor's point of view, the bank is the mortgagee. From the mortgageor's point of view, and other the man in the street whose finances are going south, my best advice is, please don't wait until the sheriff knocks on your door. Go proactively to your bank and discuss possible options, and if need be, sell your home before it's put on an auction, because you never know what's going to happen at an auction.
No, and it's such a dire warning. The consumers themselves, or should I say the homeowners, those of us who are paying bonds or mortgages, are we quick enough to alert the banks? Because it does seem to be the retort from the banks to say people are afraid to come to us when they realize that they cannot afford to pay their bond repayments, or in most situations they come to us when it's very late in the day.
But this might quite be, it's quite possible, it's a psychological thing that you, bad news you always try to postpone going to your bank manager, but that's the wrong policy. That's the wrong thing to do. As I said, go proactively as early as possible. When you see once you've lost your job, you should immediately go and speak to your bank and see what you can arrange with the bank, and put your, if need be, put your house on the regular market as soon as possible, so as to avoid the question of losing a lot of capital on an auction.
Yeah. There is an advocate, Douglas Shaw, who represents this foundation that is spearheading this class action suit. And he is talking about banks resisting the introduction of something called a reserve price system at sheriff's auctions. Do you know what that is and how it's meant to help consumers who are in financial distress?
Well, at a normal auction, of course, it's common practice to have a reserve price. And what it means in practice is, let's say you reckon your house is worth 1 million for argument's sake. And you can always, then when you auction your house, you can always have a reserve price of, say, 900,000 for argument's sake. In other words, you won't sell unless you get 900,000 to the minimum. I'm not informed about the situation with when the sheriff does an auction. So I'm afraid I can't give a definitive answer on that one.
Yeah. Finally, Mr. Roda, I want to talk to you about what your thoughts are around this class action suit. What do you think it is going to do if indeed the applicants are successful in this? Will it see a wholesale change in how this matter has been handled? Because this is something that dates back many years, as we've said at the introduction.
Oh, yes, it dates back decades. I mean, it's an old thing in many countries. Our system is different from many states in America. Many states in America have the situation where when you're in financial trouble and you can't afford your installment, you can actually take the keys of your house and hand it over to the bank, and you walk away and you don't owe the bank anything. In South Africa, it's not so. Of course, the banks, from their point of view, their priority is just to get back their money that's owed to them. And that's why I'm sure there are situations where, yes, a house is sold at less than market value because the bank's priority is just to get its money back. I personally, and I'm thinking on my feet now, even while I'm sitting, is that if we don't have a reserve price in the current system of sheriff auctions, I think it should be introduced in principle. I think it's just a moral thing to do. So that would also undermine the possibility of mafias forming and excluding other bidders who would have bid for a higher and more realistic price.
All right. Erwin Roda, thank you very much for affording us your time this afternoon. He is a property economist. Thanks indeed for your insights there.